Hi everybody, it's Dave from Wing Chun Mind Force here. This is the second in my series about Sigung CHU SHONG book, the Book of Wing Chun. This is volume 1. What I'd like to talk about this episode are Sigung's terms for describing force and power and what he called the order of use. So I'll just show you the page. I've made some notes on it. I don't know if you can see that very well. Yeah. Anyway, the great thing about this book is it's bilingual. So if you have a Chinese friend, you can always, especially a Cantonese speaker, you can always ask for a bit of extra translation if it'll help. Anyway, just starting off with terms for describing force and power. The first term that Sigung uses is idea power. Now this is the power acquired by practicing the tiny idea form set, also known as power of consciousness. Now there's a lot in this. So idea power, literally in Chinese, idea is nim, the nim mind, and power is lick. So most of you have heard at some stage of the term nim lick. That's what idea power is, it's nim lick. So nim lick is the power acquired by practicing the sil nim dao form set, the tiny idea form set. And it's also known as the power of consciousness. And I find this incredibly interesting because here Sigung CHU SHONG explicitly says that nim lick is also known as the power of consciousness. And that's really what it breaks down to. The nim mind is the subconscious mind. Some might call it the unconscious mind, but it's the power of consciousness that's not just this one. This conscious mind that we tend to think with, in inverted commas, that's sort of a normal mind nowadays, but for animals and people engaged in more natural pursuits, closer to nature, they use this other mind, the subconscious mind, mostly. And in a real life and death situation, that's generally how you survive. There's not too much time to just think, you've got to act. So there's a bit of a worry at times about the term nim lick, because there is nim lick as our Sigung demonstrated, and I didn't get the chance to feel it, but all the people have told me about it and things I've seen on videos. He had incredible power that exhibited as if something was moving under the surface. He didn't seem to move and people could feel the power, and often it was called chi, which he also sometimes translates as consciousness. But that power, it's not just Sigung level, and this is something that I've thought about for many years. Sigung states quite explicitly in this book, and we'll get to it, that everyone has nim lick, especially as little children. We just sort of forget about it. We forget how to use it because we get too conscious, too rational, too modern, really, too human. And the trick is to learn how to access that power again and put it into use consciously. So you're still a human thinking, but you can access that power. So that's the first power. The second power is moving body weight power. This is the kinetic power created by the movement of the body in different directions, forward, backward, left and right. So this is, in sil nim dao practice, in the form, we just stay very still in the body and we learn to feel our whole body as one. We learn to relax totally, feel our spine empty and fill up with energy, feel all our joints relax. Whatever we can feel. There's all sorts of levels of feeling in sil nim dao, but once we can sort of get that still body, that empty body going. In CHU, the second form, we start to learn to move, and moving body weight power is the essence of CHU. It's where we move. Everyone can do this. I mean, it's not really something hard to do if you're able to stand up and move, but to be mentally inside, in your centre of balance, in the centre line, and even in a small point, and move from that. That's what he's talking about here, moving body weight power. So the whole mass of the body's in everything you do. That's easy to say, not as easy to do, but that's the second major power. The third power is rotational power. Now this is the power generated by rotational movement around an axial point or an axis. The centre of the body, or the centre of a shoulder joint, for instance, it encompasses both propelling power and drawing power. So this basically means just moving your joints, and by staying completely relaxed as you move, the joints are able to turn. And I don't have somebody to demonstrate with at the moment. We're sort of isolated here. I'm hoping my big son's going to help me soon, and I can demonstrate to you that really once you get this idea and you can stay relaxed against any force, your joints will just open up, and it becomes really quite amazing what you can do against a lot of force if you can just rotate your joints and not seize up. And it's mostly the conscious mind, once again, that seizes up and thinks, oh, this is impossible. You know, I do this because this is one of somebody's pressing right on you, up against, just can feel like how could you possibly move from there. But it's surprisingly easy once you can do it. The fourth one is frictionless sliding power. Now I had to think for a while about what this is, but Sigung says the deflection effect manifesting the natural free rotational movements around the axial point, the centre of the body or the centre of a shoulder joint, when it is exerted by external thrusts. So that's the key. I remember when I first started with Sifu Gym, we had a practice where we'd stand in the stance, and then we'd close our eyes and somebody would just push us either shoulder, and the idea was not to sort of fight back, it was just go with it. And at the time it seemed like, what's the use of this? But once you get that feeling of a solid body and force comes in, unless it's right on your centre, you can just turn it off. It pretty much just rolls off. And I often tell my students, you older guys and girls will probably relate to this, but there's an old story about the young fella gets told by the old workers, go and move that 44-gallon drum of petrol or oil from there over to there, and the young fella goes and just busts his valve trying to move the thing, and of course it's incredibly heavy and there's no way he can move it. And then one of the old blokes goes up and says, look mate, and just tips the thing on its side and just rolls it on the edge. And that's the principle of the wheel, you know, it takes heaps of mass and it just has to start rolling. It's around the centre and it just rolls and everything becomes easy. So that's what frictionless sliding power is the power of staying relaxed and just turning around the centre or around a joint. So if somebody's pressing on me here, instead of fighting against them, I can just take their weight in and then just turn it. It's frictionless, I don't have any tension, and it just turns them away, and you just keep your angle without collapsing. The fifth one is shoulder power. Now this is a cool one. Shoulder power is power created by the movement of the entire shoulder, different to the mere shoulder joint. It encompasses both propelling power and drawing power. I didn't mention that before, but propelling power and drawing power is obviously propelling is sort of propelling away, drawing is pulling in, and in the in the forms we test like Bill G and different other things by sort of not only just going out but also coming in and flinging people and making a mess of their balance. So this one This is really interesting because being a trained anatomical artist, it clicked with me one day that there is actually a joint just here. Now if you feel your clavicle bone, you come in towards the middle, you've got two prominences there called the sternoclavicle notch. It's that notch there, this is called the sternum down the middle of your chest. Those two joints there, right, they are actually hinges, they are joints. And that whole shoulder joint moves. And it's sort of like that, like anybody who's had a V-dub knows that they have these, a suspension like that where the wheels move independently, at least in old combis. And so you've got your scapula at the back, which people call the shoulder blade, clavicle at the front, which is called the collarbone, and your arms are part of that. And when I learnt to draw figures, we were always told, don't just draw an arm, always think about the collarbone, the clavicle, the scapula at the back there. Draw it as one thing. So this is Bilji. So when we learn CHU, we pretty much keep the shoulders down and relax. When we learn Bilji, we start to use that extra joint, like that. We start to be released from just turning like a wooden dummy. We start to have the whole range. So it's literally like you've got another arm joint bone, which you have. You know, you just don't think about that. People rarely think about that, but that's actually a joint there. It does the same things as the other joints. And the sixth thing is muscular contracting force, commonly known as using brute force, force generated by tensing or contracting muscles. Now here he's not saying, yeah, we use that. This is the one we try not to use, or we don't use if we can. This is what we do in normal lifting and pushing, whatever. And I use muscular contracting force to make my body, my sinews, my joints strong by loading them up with weight. I don't do Wing Chun when I'm doing those things because there is a point to it, but that's another video. But the real point to this is that when you use muscular contracting force, what you're doing is actually just using the surface muscles, whereas you've got all sorts of muscles inside, around your spine, you've got your sinews and you've got fascia that wrap around the muscles, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the body that physiologists are only just starting to understand how complex the body is, and it's more than just muscle and bone. And when we use the Nim Dao, that subconscious mind, the Nim, it accesses muscles and sinews and parts of the body that we can't consciously access. That's why monkeys are heaps stronger than humans. This is my theory, but I know it's true, that they don't think like us, so they don't, even a little monkey can be like 5 times stronger than a big man, because they don't use the conscious mind the way we do. They always have full-on Nimlik, and everything they do, everything's in it. That's also another video. Forearm power. Power generated by the movement of the forearm that is initiated by the elbow joint. Okay, so there's two things here. There's an idea of power coming from the forearm, pushing the fist forward. there's another aspect of this that we often don't think about, but it's actually the turning of the forearm. So you've got two bones in there and they're turned in. If you turn them in here, if you consciously bring your mind back there rather than turning the wrist, which is what beginners always do when they're rolling, just thinking about the hand and the wrist. If you can put your mind back here and think of this as a sort of a barrel shape and it rolls, it's much more relaxing. You'll find you'll sort of empty the elbow when you do that, and you just roll, and you know, you can sort of do this. Somebody's trying to resist you like that, you can break them by just rolling that. It's like just sort of rolls over them. You don't push downwards, you just roll, and they can't stop because there's multiple vectors happening. So that's how I see forearm power. There is some other things I've heard of that some of the Chinese seniors talk about this, so I don't really know. There's a elbow thing that I don't fully understand, so I'll just leave it at that. I'll get around to finding out what that's about. I personally don't think about my elbow much. I just boom. Wrist power is the power generated by the movement of the wrist joint. Apart from giving rotational power, it also functions in directing and accelerating, which magnifies the power of the forearm. Now this is the Hun Sao. So Sigung says later in this book that this should be, you know, really perpendicular. Now it's just the way my body is. I can't really get past there. And I remember I used to do yoga and they were doing this sort of stuff, and I was like, I don't know how you do that, because it just doesn't happen. And everyone's got different physiology, and some people find it really easy to even come back past perpendicular. But the idea is anyway to stay relaxed, and with the wrist power, the trick is to have your mind in the fingers. Keep the wrist really empty, like consciously feel it being light and empty and expanded, and just have your mind in the tips and just move those. And so the Hun Sao, as everything else is moving, the body's moving, the arm's moving, the elbow's rolling, that we sort of do that many times in Nim Dao form, just so as we can get this really still and get power into that. And there's heaps of power in that, it's amazing. If you can get somebody to test you and you can put your minds in the fingers, you can just move and they can't really stop you. Okay? Focal point of idea. This is to use idea, that's Nim, the Nim Dao, the Nim mind, the subconscious mind, also known as consciousness, to drive power from the whole body onto the attack point. Okay, so this is really interesting one. This is Yi, intent, where you Feng Sung, you know, enter a state of Sung, and then you empty your body. There's no tension. You put your Yi, your intent, in parts of the body, and you tell them to move, and that's the focal point of idea. So you can put your mind into parts of the body, or even into the weapons, or even into the dummy, or into an opponent, and sort of be dealing with somebody, but put your mind on their spine or some other part, and practice moving that and see what happens. This is where you've got to experiment. This is sort of like an act of imagination. And Bruce Lee actually translated CHU Nim Dao as little imagination, which I sort of like, because to me that is like little means to me don't think, don't use the conscious mind. Nim Dao is the subconscious, but if you think of it as imagination, it's like a 3D image, a sort of a mind map, as I've talked about previously, that something Sigung said, that you imagine 3D, almost as if you're like a games engine. Okay, centre of weight, the point in the structure of a form that can that can stand the entire body weight. So this is the centre of your body. This is more, well, in CHU ideas we take everything to the centre, but you can move that centre around, and I won't talk about all this right now, but it's a feeling of the other person's weight comes into your centre and there's nothing left out there, and you can move them around. So the second page, order of using the different powers, Sigung writes, to carry out any task it is wise to first understand the inherent order of elements pertaining to the task. Knowing such order is equivalent to capturing the essence. So he says, there should be a feeling of order to the powers that you use. In the same way, knowing the inherent order of using different powers in a sequence and then utilising them appropriately can help unleash the maximum overall power from the whole body. The sequence is as follows: 1. Idea power, 2. Moving body weight power, 3. Rotational power, 4. Shoulder power, 5. Shoulder joint power. Shoulder power, remember, is this one here. That moves that. Shoulder joint power. Forearm power, coming from the elbow and the forearm, and then wrist power. So he says overall, following this sequence to add the powers one by one can then generally increase the overall power. This sequence also represents power generation from low to high, analogous to car driving. To attain the speed at the 5th gear, one should always start from the 1st gear and change gear levels upwards one by one. And one of my first jobs, I was a truck and bus driver, and I've driven all sorts of really old crash box beasts. I used to drive a school bus back in 1980 that was from 1942. If you don't know what a crash box is, have a look on Wikipedia. But anyway, big heavy vehicles, you always have really low gears, like not just first, but you have like, low gear and low. And if you have a big load, like driving a truck full of dirt, you start in this real low gear just to move this huge mass, just get it rolling, and then boom, 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 and you go up into the next one, and then up, and as you get speed, you go up through the gears. So in Wing Chun, in CHU, we start to use that lower range gear, so we start to move from that centre, whatever we do, and that we can pivot, and we can step, we can move, and then it rolls up through all those gears to the Hun Sao. So it's a flowing sequence of smooth gear changes, you might say. For all intents and purposes, it should be like it's one thing, but for training yourself, you should start off for quite a while just thinking about that first gear, because we tend to always forget about our centre when we're new at it, and even if you've been doing it for a lot of years, you can find yourself forgetting to use your centre. It's vital that that becomes just an absolute habit. Anyway, that'll do. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.